Welcome to The One Inside, an internal family systems podcast. I'm your host, Tammy Sollenberger. On today's podcast, I chat with Norma Stevens about IFS and psychedelics. Hey everyone, I am so excited to chat with Norma today. Norma will tell you her story, which is so amazing. But she is a certified IFS therapist and approved IFS supervisor. She's also PA'd for level 1, level 2, level 3, and has presented at the 2019 IFS annual conference. This is actually where I met Norma. She PA'd at my level 2, and then we hung out at the conference together, and she is so lovely, and I was super excited when she reached out to be on the podcast. So everyone's talking about this issue right now. And so I'm so excited. Norma is the exact person to come on and talk about this with us. If you want to find out more about Norma, you can check out her LinkedIn page. You can also email her at norma.stevens with a V. So Norma.Stevens, STEVENSLCPC at gmail.com. I'll put that in the show notes because I know you're not writing that down. I mean, I don't write down things when I'm listening to podcasts, so I'm sure you're not either. So definitely email her. You can also email me. I put up a free parts meditation recently on my website. So my website is tammysollenberger.com, and there you can listen to free past episodes and get the free parts meditation. Also, connect with me on socials at the One Inside Facebook page and at IFS Tammy on Twitter, Instagram, and Clubhouse. Norma calls this sacred work, and I believe that after she describes what happens in this process and all of the care and support that goes around the treatment of psychedelics and combining that with IFS, that sounds like sacred work to me. Enjoy. Why don't we start with you telling everybody just where you are in the world and what would you see if you looked out a nearest window?
Okay. Well, just by chance, I am at the Aquilino Cancer Center. Within that is the William Richards Healing Center, which is one of the I believe it's one of the first centers built specifically for psychedelic assisted treatment. And I'm in a treatment room right now. It's so it's a very calmly furnished space. It's very neutral colors, and there's I have this beautiful window here that I'm looking out, and it looks out onto a garden. And the garden has just a fountain and flowers and a gazebo and places to sit. So it's really lovely. And then in the room, there's a couch that I'm sitting on right now that can transform into a bed for dosing day, and some comfortable chairs. And then we have a little closet over here where people can store their things. And on the wall is a monitor, a small panel where we record all the sessions, and the music is piped in. So it's piped in through headsets, and it's for the participant, and it's also piped in the room so that we can hear. So it's really cool.
Okay, so you said so much, and I have 100 questions.
Okay.
So first of all, though, you are in where I'm from. Yeah,
where? Yeah, Rockville.
You're in Rockville,
Maryland, right now.
Yes.
So we're very close to DC.
Yes. Okay. Which I'm from Maryland. I'm not from Rockville, but I'm from Maryland. So, and is that where you're from? Are you from Maryland?
No, I'm from Massachusetts.
Okay.
But I've been here a long time.
Yes. Okay. I thought that was true. I was like, I thought you were from up here and then you ended up down there. Yeah. So how long, so this is the first treatment center that is like this. And how long have you worked there?
Since last November, actually coming to the center. I probably started with the center though a year before that, but because of COVID, we were doing a lot of work on Zoom and meetings on Zoom.
Okay.
But we started to see our first participants in November.
And what type of participants are coming in? Like
Okay, so I'm on a study right now. It is a simultaneous administration, meaning we have 4 people that we're treating at once. For cancer patients with depression. And the purpose of this particular study is to see if, I mean, obviously to look at outcomes to see how, how they do with this treatment, and but also to see how we can do it safely, because the typical psychedelic assisted therapy up till now has um, involved 2 therapists per person. And we're looking at, is there a way to do this so that maybe eventually down the road insurance companies would cover this and make it more cost effective. So what we have is we've got 4 participants, but rather than 8 therapists, we're using 6. So we have each person during the dosing has a therapist with them, and then we have 2 therapists in a control room watching. They're watching all 4 sessions the whole time. And then they will come in and relieve us if we need to use the restroom or whatever. But that person will never be alone.
I love it. And is that something that is not always true? Like some of these treatments are just getting, like the participants would just get dosing. Am I saying they'll sort of get dosing without the therapist, or like not?
Not in a clinical trial. And in
Okay.
fact, I probably should back up a little further. But so what happens is, if they're interested in the study, they come in, they get screened. We have a psychologist that does that, and then we do an initial preparation session. It's 2 hours, and that's when I first meet them. And it's a little bit of, me giving them all the information about the study and telling them how we're going to support them, help them understand, what kinds of things can happen, what can they expect, and if challenging experiences come up, how we're going to support them through those experiences. And then I see them again for another prep session, for an individual prep, and then we also bring them together as a group and do more prep as a group. So it's 2 hours with an individual therapist and 2 hours of prep, with 1 hour with individual and another hour with the group. And then after that, the next day is the dosing day.
Okay.
And that is an 8-hour session.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And what happens in one of those sessions? Yeah, that's great. What happens in one of those sessions?
The dosing?
Yeah.
It's so variable. I have to tell you, there's so much parallel with IFS and psychedelics. It is mind blowing, quite frankly. And you know how when you work with clients in IFS, it's so unique, right? Everybody's interior system is different. It's unique to them, and yet there are themes, obviously. Same thing with psychedelics. So whatever happens to that person, if they're prepped and they feel safe, right?
Yeah.
Then that experience will be exquisitely attuned to them. And sometimes, we ask them, part of the prep is, what is your intention? And then even when they have an intention, we ask them to hold it lightly, because, when you start with someone in an IFS session, they might say, oh, well, I want to look at this anxiety. That's your intention, right? And then how many times at the end the client said, wow, I didn't know I would go there, right?
Yeah.
Very much like a psychedelic. Like, here's the outcome. Here's the intention, and we're going to see. So there are times when, like some sessions, I'm just holding presence for the whole time. They are mostly inside, and we're getting up and I'm helping them to the restroom and getting them drinks and things like that. But it's very, very internal. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I should say is, and then other people will be crying and sobbing and having, a difficult but maybe very important experience for them, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Like healing or releasing or.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. So but just being able to be attuned to that person the whole time. Now we're working with psilocybin, and we're working with a high dose of psilocybin. And that also has a lot to do with what the experience is going to be. So for example, in a high dose psilocybin session like this, I'm not going to be doing a lot of parts work. Like at times there's no language. They can't even speak because they're really up out of their body, right? So that's not a place where I'm going to be able to do parts work. But the integration, oh my, there could be so much.
Yeah, tell me about
IFS can
that.
be so rich. Unfortunately, in the study that I'm in now, I can't use IFS. But what I am using, and they call it, it's sponsored by Compass Pathways, and they have their own model, but it's very much about fleshing out parts, right?
Okay.
So when they're talking about their experience, well, I'm noticing, it's about keeping people in the present. Well, I'm noticing, this rumination that I don't have it anymore. And I'll say, well, so what's that like? What do you have instead? Well, I have freedom. Oh, where do you feel that in your body? Right. So it's very much like fleshing out parts.
Yeah.
But I could see eventually how beautiful it would be to have that freedom to combine IFS and psychedelics, because in the prep session, right, we could work with, I love what Bob Grant says. He says, you can always get a part to sign the informed consent to do this, right?
Yeah.
Well, we all know as IFS therapists, there are parts in there that don't want to do this, or they're afraid or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So be with them in that prep session, work with the protectors. How do they feel about doing this? What's their concerns? I think it would be a beautiful way to prep and get ready. And what intentions are coming up? Maybe some parts have one intention, some parts have the other. Let's hear all voices, right?
Yeah.
And even if a part doesn't want to do it, it doesn't mean you don't get to do the work, but you can at least either reassure it, or the part might just feel happy that it was voiced, it was able to be expressed, right?
Yeah.
And then with the dosing, oh, go ahead.
Okay. So no. Go ahead with the dosing.
Let me just, so
go ahead.
dosing, it really depends on the dose and the drug. So I think sometimes with MDMA, people are more in their bodies. That might be more of an opportunity, depending, and again, on the dose. If the dose is too high, then people are not in a place to do parts work. But as people are coming down, like if you hear Bob Grant talking about ketamine, as people are coming down, there's so much openness, right? And that's when you can do a lot of parts work. And then, of course, the integration. You can do a lot of parts work and integration and really let them get the richness of the experience, because it's not a drug like an antidepressant. Here, take this antidepressant and your depression's going to go away and your trauma goes away. That's not what it is at all. It's an opening of your system, and it's putting the protectors, sometimes it's putting them to sleep. It's the default mode network in the brain, the amygdala. It's going to sleep so you can go to those places you need to go to. So then in the integration, it's important. You can update protectors, right? Something's different here. And then work with the system to integrate the experience and the healing. And it is amazing to me that some people, well, in fact, in the MDMA studies, they'll show like right after the treatment, after the 3 sessions, after their 13, it's about a 13-week treatment, they'll find, say, 50% don't meet the criteria for PTSD. At the end of the year, it goes higher, something like 68%.
Wow.
In other words, it keeps working. You've opened the system up and you can keep working it. Does that make sense?
It does. So does it in IFS language, is the drug then relaxing protectors so that self can then heal the exiles?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, with MDMA especially, not only does it shut down the default mode network, but it also has oxytocin. So there's such an expanded level of self. So it's really cool because, yes, you are having the protectors go to sleep, right? But there's also way more self energy. So then you can go to those really difficult traumas that, you may never get to in an IFS session, or it might take 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so is it this is the only word I can think of. Like, is it concrete? Like, does the person, when they come out and they're processing, are they able to say, "Oh, I saw these memories," or like, or is it just a sort of bodily experience that there is this freedom now, or is it that, "Oh, I went to that part and that memory, and then there's freedom."
It's a
Like,
really good question.
okay,
And the answer is it depends.
okay, it could
You
be,
know,
yeah,
it could be. I mean, it could be that they do go. I find that more with MDMA. They go to more, the trauma. There's more sensitive parts.
okay,
With psilocybin, it feels more abstract than that. Um,
interesting.
it's and honestly, I don't fully understand it. Um,
Like
but
like
in
what's
other words,
happening, and
exactly
yeah,
what
yeah,
happened, but it's like somehow the rigid structures have been opened. And um, in a neuroscience sense, and I am not the expert on neuroscience, but what I can say is that, um, like some of the work of Robin Carter Harris, he's at the Imperial College in London, has shown, like with MRIs, that like psilocybin actually causes more connections within the brain. Like he could show that on an MRI,
wow.
where the areas of the brain weren't connecting, they are now connecting.
Wow. Wow. And it sounds like that's not just a one time you come in and have the session and they're connecting, but that actually, like, your body
Build on
must,
it.
yes, yeah, right,
But I
right.
think too, it's even like the same thing with IFS, right? You could have an amazing IFS session, but you've got to integrate it.
Yeah, yeah,
You've got to keep working it. If you have one, like imagine going and having one very dramatic IFS session and then going on for the rest of your life,
yeah,
right? It's
right,
That's not enough. You
right,
have to keep working it.
right. Okay. So are there people that think that this is just a, like, not just a, but it's a, like a miracle drug, right? Like, I'm going to come in and miracle drug and it's going to save me. And yeah, okay.
I have concerns about. I have a lot of concerns about that because there's a
Okay.
lot of hype around this.
Yeah.
And sometimes I notice during prep sessions I have to sort of dispel people of some of the myths, like I'm going to just take this and I'm going to be a different person tomorrow. It's not how it works. It's
Okay.
still got to do the work, right? And
Yeah.
I have a lot of concerns about having these administered well,
Yeah.
and safely and with the right kind of training. And I think this is where IFS is can be a tremendous asset to this medicine, because it's not, like we all know as IFS therapists, right? If you're going to psychedelics from IFS, it's going to feel like you're in a warm, comfortable glove. But when you first start with IFS, that whole, if you were a CBT therapist, or if you were a therapist where you're sort of the expert and you're giving direction or you're giving advice, that doesn't work in IFS and it's not going to work here,
Mm,
right? It's
yeah.
The parallels are just like we believe in the power of the self, the capital S self, and that's where the healing is. In psychedelics, it is words are often inner healing intelligence, right? That's what we're talking about, is
Yeah,
self,
same
right?
thing. Yeah,
It's the
yeah,
same thing, and
yeah,
that the therapist is not directional. The therapist is being attuned to that client, holding presence, going with the client wherever the client needs to go, right? And
yeah,
that's how we're trained.
yeah, yeah,
And that's where I think IFS could do so much good in psychedelics, is helping with those sessions, as I had said earlier, especially the prep and the integration, but also with the therapist training, and also with giving therapists the tools, right? To know, am I in self? Am I have access to self, right? Or I don't know, do I have a part now that's terrified because this
mhm,
person is in extreme state? I've got to help that part to just trust me, step back, and let me be with the person, right?
mm,
Because if my scared parts get in the way, that could be really harmful.
yeah, yeah. Um, Tell me about, so what I've heard before, I have a friend that has a client that says she's up in Maine, and she says that her client is getting treatment where basically I think that this she just gets dosed and then left. Like I don't think that she's being, and my friend has a lot of concerns. So it doesn't sound like in those, and I wonder if this is as it's getting bigger and bigger, that maybe that's happening more where
It's
people
happening
just
a lot with ketamine clinics, right?
okay,
People are just
yes,
going in
okay.
and they're getting infusions and leaving, and there's no therapy.
Yeah.
Really, I find that personally troublesome.
Yeah. So what's the thought there, right? Like, what's the thought is I'll go in
Well,
and I'll get the ketamine and what will happen?
because I think that it's kind of coming from I'm not sure. I can't speak for everybody what everybody thinks, but I guess what comes up for me is that people are thinking it's the molecule, it's the medicine, like a drug. I'm going to give you Zoloft to relieve your depression. I'm going to give you ketamine to relieve your depression, right? And I mean, there is some biological things, right? Like I said, psilocybin and even ketamine, it can increase connections,
Yeah.
but there's more to it than that.
Right.
That's
It's
just
almost like
part of
wasting an
it.
opportunity, right?
Yes,
Like,
that's it.
I
I
love
actually
it.
said to someone, when I was thinking about this, giving people drugs with no therapy, right? I said, you know, at, at minimum, you're missing a great opportunity.
Mm,
And maximum, you're doing harm.
yeah, yeah,
Because this medicine is not meant for everybody. That's another key point.
yeah.
Screening is really important, and we're still learning about screening. I don't pretend I have all the answers, and I don't think anyone does. I think we're learning as we go.
Yeah.
But like, for example, in the research, they've been very conservative. They're not allowing anybody with a history of psychosis, or even, like, I think a first generation relative who has a psychotic disorder, because this can disorganize people. If this is not done in a supportive fashion and the person isn't ready, this could be very disorganizing.
Mm,
The other thing, I mean, I think about it like with IFS, if you've got a client, right, who's in an external environment that is not safe, whatever reason, they might have some toxic parents, or they might have toxic spouse, or whatever, right? Your exile, the amount of work you do with exiles is probably limited, because they're going home to a place that's not safe,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
We're working more with protectors, right? We might be doing
yeah.
some problem solving. Same with psychedelics. If this person doesn't have a supportive place to be, and someone to what, a supportive network in their life, psychedelics may not be the place for them.
Mm,
I
mm,
don't know yet, but that's
yeah,
what I'm concerned about.
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess tell me about what brought you into it. Like, what brought you into this specialty? I want to hear about that. And
Funny.
yeah, let's do that.
Well, in 2014, Michael Mithofer came and showed his videos at the annual conference. And I remember in that moment, like, it was like a little ping in my heart. And I was just like, wow, would I love to do that? And of course, my intellect and other parts just shut it down, because that's in clinical science. And he's an MD. I am not an MD. And
Mm,
that's done. I will never think about this again. And that was it. And then in a couple of years ago, I was PAing in a level 1 in DC, and it was towards the end of the training, and there was a participant who was asking if any therapist would like to join a team to go to the MAPS training. MAPS is uh, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and they do MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD, and they were having a training. And again, my heart was going ping, and I said, I want to do that. And I can't tell you how much I agonized. I was like telling my husband, I don't know, this isn't even legal. I got to pay all this money. I might never even get to do this. It felt like jumping off a cliff. And I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And then we couldn't find, the other thing about, at that time, you couldn't apply unless you were unless you had a team of therapists, a doctor working with a doctor, and a site. So we just happened to hear about, there's some doctor in Rockville who's kind of interested in psychedelics, had no idea. he agreed to meet with us. We're like, oh, okay. We show up at this meeting. Well, they were in the plant. The psychedelic center here was in blueprint. They were getting ready. They hadn't even built it yet. They were doing another study on psilocybin in cancer patients. And we had this hour-long meeting, and he just said, yeah, we'll sponsor you. And he goes, I don't know how this is all working. But it'll unfold. I remember walking out of there like, what the hell just happened?
Wow. Wow.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And now, since then I went, we did MAPS, then we through there, we had contacts. We ended up doing the psilocybin training with Compass and coming back here. And now we formed a core team of therapists, and they are the most beautiful people I have ever worked with. Every time I come here, at the end, I feel like I'm just swimming in self energy.
Wow.
And it's sometimes I just pinch myself. I go, I don't know how I got here.
I love that. I love that. That is a beautiful story. I love it.
It's so, there's so much spiritual. This feels very divinely.
Yes. I was just going to say, right, like those pings, that's the universe telling you and pulling you, and you just happen to this guy, you know what I mean? Like there's no way.
There's no accidents.
Yeah, no way. No way. You just happen to be peeing at that thing, and he like, come on.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Tell me about, I guess I want to hear more, if it feels okay, to talk about this therapy for people that don't know. I mean, people like me who I just keep hearing about it, and I hear my friend talking about it with the client that she's working with. She's an IFS therapist, my friend Josie. Hi, she's going to be listening to this, I know. And so, for someone like me, like why do you think this therapy is so I wanted to say controversial, but that's not really what I mean. I actually mean more like, why is it so booming right now? Like I think it used to be controversial, and it was just with like veterans with PTSD, but now it seems to be a little more mainstream. It's becoming more mainstream, I guess. I don't know. So I guess I'm curious about that. What you think about that?
Yeah, I think that back in the 50s, they had a lot of promising research with psychedelics. Like they were LSD. They were using LSD to treat alcoholism. It's amazing.
Wow.
And in fact, I believe the founder of AA, he attributes his sobriety to LSD treatments. So I mean, it is amazing. But then in the it's really paradoxical. And then it got, I think that people, they misused it. They're out doing it parties or whatever.
The 60s, right.
The 60s. Then it got like somehow it was combined with counterculture, and everyone got frightened, and then they shut down all the research starting around the 70s. In fact, my mentor right now, his name is Bill Richards. He said he has the distinction of giving the last dose of psilocybin in research in the 70s. And he was working,
wow.
I'm not sure which type of patients he was working with, but he was working in Maryland at the time at Spring Grove. And then he started 20 years later working at Hopkins, doing cancer studies and studies for spirituality and those kinds of things. And, it's amazing how it's coming around. But I think that the research is so promising, and there's more and more and more and more of it, that it's just starting to mushroom, so to speak.
Nice. You're going to do bad jokes too. Yes.
I know. I'm really bad.
No, I love it. So, but I wonder if that's part of like a polarization. Like now that we don't have to fight against that polarization of like, we don't want to be attached to like, research clinical, we doesn't want to be attached to like counterculture and hippies in the 60s. So we don't have that fight anymore. So research maybe has a little more flow and more freedom to do that.
I'm sure. And I'm also thinking the cannabis industry being legalized has probably had some influence as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any idea why it was so helpful for alcoholics? Like, what was it about
Well, my sense is LSD works a lot like, I mean, it's a classic psychedelic. So it works like a lot of the others, is whereas it's putting down the default mode network and you're going into, what is under alcoholism, right? It's wounding.
Right. So if we think of so alcohol is a firefighter, right? So a part of me that drinks too much is a firefighter. Then if I go in and I heal the fire, the exile, then the firefighter doesn't have to do that job.
Doesn't have to do it anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's also a spiritual component of this that really cannot be understated. I mean, it is really phenomenal, right? Well, like when you connect, like if you think about the 12 steps, right? They always talk about connecting with your higher power and being able to surrender to your higher power, right? It's and in an IFS, we encounter the spiritual all the time. And this is the same thing. There's such people, like sometimes Christians will see Jesus, and sometimes Hindus will see a god or goddess that means something to them. However, the divine reaches us, right? And in the Hopkins studies, one of their studies showed that 80, I'm trying to get these, I'm not great at remembering the numbers, but so this is 80-ish. But 80-ish,
I love ish, yes.
80-ish% of the people in that one study at Hopkins, they rated their experience with psilocybin as one of the top 5 most profound experiences in their life. And 50%, it was the most profound experience of their life. And they were comparing things like birth of their child.
Wow. And that's the experience in the room, like when they're in that room, like that you're in right now. So can you tell me without, obviously without specifics, but like what's happening in that room? Like either what are you seeing as the therapist, or what would one experience in that room that's so profound? Like, what is occurring that's so profound?
That's a really hard question to answer, because the experiences are so varied for everyone, right? So some people might have this wonderful mystical experience where their ego dissolves and they become one with all of humanity, all of creation, one with the universe, right? Other people might have a beautiful experience with a guide, right? Other people may have none of that. They may just have, oh my gosh, I can feel my emotions for the first time in 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all they needed at that moment. That's what they needed.
Yeah.
So
and how profound that would be. Like, we can't take that lightly, that I could feel my feelings for the first time in 10 years. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm not ruminating anymore.
Yeah, the healing, the gift of that, right? The gift
I just think of this. I've had my rumination, my own share, right? How much suffering is that?
Yeah.
When you're caught in a ruminating loop, to be free of that. And the other thing is, it feels like at times, my sense of it is, it's like doing months or years of therapy in one short period. And I'm not going to say it's just the dosing day. I'm not just saying it's like, say, between the prep, the dosing, and the integration, you're doing a lot of work in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah. Well, and maybe what's true too, and this happens, I think, with IFS is, so maybe you have a dosing day. I mean, I'm making this up because clearly I don't know what I'm talking about, but like you have a dosing day and then you go out and then you don't ruminate. And so then as you're going about your day and going to the grocery store, whatever you're doing, yes, tell me.
And you're sort of like, yeah, right. I'm not doing what I usually do in this situation.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say, I haven't had any dramatic experience, but I notice I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And some people have real challenging experiences, like really scary experiences, and we have to prepare them for that. And again, I got to talk about Bill Richards again, because I love this man, as you can tell. He'll say, So if you feel like you're going to die, just go die. Because it's like surrender, trust, let go. You know, if you see the eye of the monster, dive in his mouth and look out his eyes. What does he have to show you? Right? Really be with the curiosity and as much as you can. Collect this is another one I love. Ask your intellect to have a day off and go in and collect the experiences. You'll make sense of it later. Just collect your experiences. It's so beautiful.
That is beautiful. I love it. That's beautiful. I mean, gosh, those are good lessons for us,
Right?
whether we're dosing or not. Like, wow,
Right?
beautiful.
It's like, you may not always get what you want, but you will get what you need. But I do want to say a lot about safety in this and some of the components that I think are really, and if you're not doing this yourself and you have clients that are like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, you really want to make sure, in psychedelic medicine, they always talk about set and setting, the mindset of the person, and then the safety, the setting of the physical location. But I think in my personal experience, I would add more to that. I had this great conversation with an IFS colleague, Joanna Lawson. She's out in Iowa, and we were talking about this. And just when you're collaborating and you're just booming off each other. So this is what our little collaboration came up with. It is screening, right? Is this the time and season of life for this person? Does this person have a psychological disorder that may not be suited to this? Like, really do some good screening. Do they have supports? All those things, right?
Yeah.
The mindset of the client. They need to be prepared for this. They need to be prepared and given scenarios of what could happen. Doesn't mean it will, but these things could. And what are we going to do when you do find yourself terrified? What are ways I can support you through that? One thing that I love about psychedelic medicine is that not only is the use and touch encouraged, it's needed quite often, where the person and the touch is very limited. Hand, shoulder, at least in the study that I'm in now, hand and shoulder. We practice it in the prep sessions, but sometimes when someone's going through a scary experience, they just need to be grounded. Hold my hand, and I know I'm coming back. I know you're there, and I'm okay, and I can face whatever I'm looking at right now, right?
Yeah. Wow.
So really preparing the person, right? They know this isn't just a drug to take and then they're going to be a different person next day. They got to know that. They got to do the work, right? Yeah. Third, setting, right? The music we use it came from Hopkins, and it's actually tailored to the trajectory of the medicine.
Wow.
It's really cool.
Norma just did a kind of a wavelength with her wave motion with her hand. Yeah, love it.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm so Italian,
it's great. No, I love it.
And then the place has to be safe. The person has to be safe. They need to feel like you've got them, right? Yeah. They need to have a supportive person there who's not going to be afraid, right? All things are welcome. Yeah. Right? Yeah. All things are welcome. All parts, right? Yeah. And not to feel judged, all those kind of things. So setting and skill of the therapist, right? I mean, this isn't just sitting with someone and getting them orange juice every couple hours. Like, yes, that's a part of it, but there's more to it than that. I believe, my personal belief. Yeah. And then, of course, support around them, whether it's within, and what we'd like to do here in the center, we're looking at starting a ketamine clinic, and we'd like to do more groups with it, and as well as individual work. And the groups can become community and support, and there's a lot of healing in that, right? So and a lot of the indigenous people, they do this work in groups, right? So So my 4 or 5 S's in safety are screening, setting, skill, support, and Joanna Lawson too.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, even though her name doesn't start with an S.
Yes.
I love that. Well, and what you described from the beginning of the podcast was how you set that up, right? You described that screening process, that support process at the beginning, and why that's also important.
And also, I should also say, in the clinical trials, whether it's this Compass one, and I'm going to be doing one with MDMA, they're all medically screened as well. So there are medical contraindications for psychedelics. So, for example, if you have high blood pressure, it doesn't mean you may not be able to eventually do psychedelics, but that has to be controlled. There's antidepressants that, for most psychedelics, you cannot be on antidepressants. You have to do a washout and be off of them for a certain amount of time. With ketamine, that, because that's on a different receptor, it's on the glutamate receptors. Most of them can be, most of the antidepressants you can still be on while you're doing ketamine. But my point is that it's really important to know these things.
Yeah, right. This is so, I mean, even as you're describing it, it's like, this is not something we take lightly. Like, this is not something to be taken lightly. Like, not that
No,
taking a
it's
Prozac is taken lightly. Like, that's not either. But certainly that doesn't have the effects, the negative
yes.
or the.
Well, it's sort of like, I see it like the relationship, right? Of the protector is just as extreme as the hurt that it's protecting, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Psychedelics have immense power to heal and to help, right?
Yeah.
And commensurate also the power to do harm if not done well.
So in the time, we have a couple minutes left. Two things that you said that I thought we could talk about is it like wrong or bad that psychedelics bypass protectors? I want to hear about that.
That's a
And
really good question.
okay, so let's do that, and then we can I guess I want to hear about that, and I also want to hear the sort of the danger, the bad trip kind of idea. But if we don't get to that, that's okay. So tell me
No,
about
I
the
think we can do
bypassing.
both.
Okay, let's do it.
Actually, I'd like to address the bad trip idea first, actually,
Sure.
if that's okay. Yeah, what we will say is there's no such thing as a bad trip. There's only challenging trips, right?
Like the monster.
Like the monster, or maybe having to go into a very extreme trauma situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be necessary for one's healing, right? But if I'm not in a place where I'm being supported, or I don't feel safe, or right,
Yeah,
then it could really be harmful.
yeah.
Right. As far as bypassing protectors, it makes sense. It's a very it does bypass protectors. It actually absolutely does, and that's why I think doing the preparation ahead, but also the integration behind.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, right.
Invite
Updating
the
those
protectors in, right?
Yes,
And then update them.
Yep. Yeah.
That's, we do that in unburdening, right? The same thing has to happen.
Yeah. I love that, because with the beginning of it, right? So the beginning, you're letting the protectors know, here's what we're going to do. And so yes, they might not all sign that permission slip to say, yes, you can bypass us, but you get enough on board to get there. And then that makes so much sense. So in some ways, you're not really bypassing them. I mean, you are, but you aren't, because you've gotten the permission, and then you go with integration and an update, and that way they know that they're still important. And
exactly, and they're being freed to do something else.
Yes.
So that's why it's not right. It's not just the drug or the medicine. It is prep and integration, and in the healing is in the integration.
Yeah, nope, that makes so much sense. Yeah.
One other concern people typically have is addiction, right?
Yes. Tell me about that. Yeah.
Yes. So the classic psychedelics have they rank very low on the addiction probabilities. The only exception to that is ketamine. But again, if it's done in the proper setting, administered at that proper dosage, It's not a street drug. This is pharmaceutical grade psilocybin or pharmaceutical grade, pure MDMA, right? Done in a clinical setting, it's going to be okay. It's just like, we prescribe Ativan. That can be very highly addictive, right? You got to do it with care.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, and I was thinking that, I could see though, if you have this amazing experience that you'd want it again. But I guess even like with Ativan, if Ativan calms you down enough that maybe you can do things that you love, then you don't need the Ativan again because the Ativan has, I don't know, right? Like it's sort of calmed that anxiety down enough that I can go do the thing and have an enjoyable time.
Right. And break the cycle a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's usually for short-term use, right?
Right.
I mean, I'm not a doc.
Supposed
I
to
should be
be. I know.
careful.
I know. But it's so hard though, because we hear it all the time, right? So
Yeah.
it's not that
Yeah.
I'd want
Right.
to, but then I have to say, all right, I'm not telling you what to do, but
Yeah.
yeah. What else do you want to say? What else do you want the listeners to know about the like healing power of IFS and psychedelics?
Oh, it's just so sacred work. It's just beautiful sacred work. And I feel like that anyone who really takes in the teaching of IFS, really lives the model and does the work, would fit in beautifully into this work. I mean, we have a leg up. And what I'm hoping is that my concern is as this is starting to really grow and a lot of other therapists are going to be coming into this space, I would like them to have access to IFS.
Yeah.
So we can help them make those transitions that they're going to need to make from maybe some of the models that they've been in.
Yeah. No, I think that makes so much sense, right? That if they have the IFS framework, at least they understand multiplicity and self.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the roadmap, right? Like Dick, I
Yeah.
think Dick says it provides a map into the interior life.
Yeah.
And there's those rules of inner physics that he talks about, right?
Yep.
I think we should all know those.
Yes, I agree. I love it. Norma, this is fantastic. So if people want to know more about you or about the work that you're doing there or anything, how do they get in touch with you? What do you recommend as far as resources?
There's so as far as resources, the trainings that I know of now are the California Institute of Integral Studies has a psychedelic assisted certificate program that's very, very highly respected. There's also, I think Polaris is one, and Phil Wolfson has something on, those are on ketamine. MAPS is now doing MDMA training. Compass is doing psilocybin training. Compass and USONA is another organization. So you can Google any of those if you're interested in some of the trainings. And there's others. I just don't know. Can't think of off the top of my head.
That's okay.
If anyone wants to get a hold of me, I guess they could just email me. I could just send you my email.
Great. Yep. Send me your email and I'll put it in the show notes. Perfect.
Yeah, just norma.stevenslcpc@gmail.com. And I guess look at my LinkedIn if you want to look at more information there, but probably wouldn't give you that much. But
okay. And then what's the center that you work for? What's the name of it so people can look that up and just find out more about that?
Yeah, it's still like this is all like really just developing. If you go to the Aquilino Cancer Center in Rockville, Maryland, it'll talk about you could get to the study, but I don't think we even have a separate website yet for the William Richards Healing Center yet. So
okay.
We're still moving, but if anyone has any questions, they can always email me and I'm happy to respond or send more information or whatever.
Perfect. And you mentioned Bob Grant, and Bob was he the speaker at the annual conference a couple of years ago?
Yeah,
and did a whole thing. And he's out in California, so people could probably get in touch with him. I know he and I emailed back and forth about the podcast right after that, I think, but nothing ever came of that. But Bob Grant is in California. And then Norma, I always end with, if you weren't doing what you're doing and you had to do something different, what would you do instead?
Um, I feel like my whole life has prepared me to be here right now. But if I had to do something instead, I would say I'd be rehabbing thoroughbred horses. I would
Wow.
just, the ones that, maybe they didn't have a great career in racing, or maybe their racing career is over. And I would want to work with them and turn them into a pleasure horse or
I
dressage
love
horse
that.
or something like that.
I love that. Or it's another type of healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Norma, this was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I just love talking to you.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you liked this episode, make sure you subscribe. And if you really like this episode, share it with a friend and leave a review. You can follow me on Instagram at IFS Tammy and join our community on Facebook at the One Inside Podcast. Talk to you next time.